Today, we're going Jazza style and doing a random challenge. I'm going to be painting a random Space Marine in a random amount of time. Now, I have not painted a Space Marine in like over 10 years. I've never painted a Primaris Space Marine, so this should be fun, this should be interesting. Let's check it out. Alright, so I have created this little Space Marine chapter randomizer with the original Loyalist chapters. If you want to try this challenge out yourself, the link will be down in the description below for both randomizers, so you can try it out yourself. Let me know what experiences you have with it. I'd be curious to hear what you got. So without further ado, let's figure out what chapter we're going to be painting today. Alright, let's see. I have not painted anything other than Blood Angels and Ultramarines, and it's been forever. And it doesn't look like it's going to change because we're painting... Oh, I spoke too soon. Oh my gosh. Raven Guard, right? That's what they're called? Oh my god. Alright, Raven Guard. Got it. Angsty emo boys. I can do that as an angsty emo boy myself.
Tonight will be the night that I will fall for you.
Interesting. All right, this will be fun. Let's figure out how long we have to paint our, dark brooding Raven boy. All right, so I have kind of divided up the time frames a little oddly, I guess, just to try and make it a little bit more compelling. Let me know if you have different ideas for how I should break up the time zones, or if I should have different times altogether. I'm definitely open for some changes and adjustments on this part of it. Let me know what time frames you think I should include in the next one if we want to do another one. But let's figure out how long we have to paint our Raven Guard boy. The 30 minutes would be interesting, but it doesn't matter because we got 3 hours, which I feel like is more than enough time to paint a pretty good looking Raven Guard guy. So I think we should just get into it. I gotta do a little research on Raven Guard. Honestly, don't know a lot about him, so let's figure that out. Raven Guard was kind of an interesting chapter for me to get. I honestly did not know a lot about them. And I knew painting black would offer an interesting challenge, as it can be really intimidating color to paint for some. Based on my research about the chapter, I knew I wanted to go with a more grayish tone. When painting black, people commonly lean into bluish tones or purple tones, but I didn't really feel like that matched the Raven Guard, and so I knew I wanted to stick with a grayish tone. Now, I got this mini from my LGS's used mini section, so it was already built in the way you see it. Next time, I definitely think I'd like to get a new box set just so that I have some customization items to really help the mini stand out and be a part of its chapter. This is something that may seem obvious to others, but I have begun taking reference pictures of the mini itself when it's just prime black. I usually try to have my lighting coming from the angle I'm wanting to paint on it, and this really just gives a really good idea of how to paint in those highlights, where to place them, what the gradient kind of will look like. I've always seen other painters do this, but I've only recently applied it to my process and have found it extremely helpful. After I applied my all black primer, I did a very subtle zenithal highlight with an 80-20 mix of German gray and Gravestone blue, just from a top-down angle. This really just had a very subtle tonal shift, but it really helped me guide my future layers in the next steps. For my first layer, I went in with an 80-20 mix of German gray and Gravestone blue thinned down a little bit with water, and painted this in to mostly cover my zenithal spots that I had done with my airbrushing, just to help give it a little bit more saturation and establish my first layer of my volumetric highlight. I would now add a bit more Gravestone blue to this 80-20 mix from previous section and layer it in a slightly smaller area. The key thing when highlighting areas like this is to paint each highlight in a smaller area than you did before. This helps give you a subtle blending effect and layer effect in each step so that your highlight slowly builds and makes kind of more of a gradient than a stark change. Now, like I said before, I did not want to go into a blue tone. I wanted more of a grayish tone. So instead of adding more Gravestone blue, I switched to Graphite and added Graphite to my mix, sticking with about an 80-20 mix with my previous mix and then the Graphite. This helped me eliminate some of that blue tone and add a little bit more gray back into my highlights. I would continue this process of adding a small bit of Graphite to my mixture and layering appropriately, doing less of an area than I did before. Now remember to refer to your reference photos that you took before. This will really help you pick your placement for your highlights and understand how quick of a gradient you need to establish with your layers. It's very helpful, and I would really recommend just having them up while you're painting. For the final highlight, I added just a touch of silver gray to the mixture for my very final couple layers. Now, I am no master of highlighting or volumetric highlighting, but I found it really effective to utilize my reference photos a lot, and as I continue to try and get better at this, I find this to be a very essential task to getting better at it. Alright, now I get it. These blends are not the smoothest thing on the planet.
All your excuses are lies.
But I am working within a limited time constraint, and ultimately, I just didn't want to do it anymore. I was kind of over blending and over doing these highlights. They're a little rough, but I think overall my effect is there. I wanted a grayish tone of a highlight, and I think it looks like that. I'm pretty happy with this in the time that I did it. And if I filled it a squad of these for a kill team, I'd be pretty pleased with that. I think that would look pretty sweet. Now, I'm trying to push myself to get better at this type of highlighting, and I found this to be a really good, honestly, second attempt at ever doing it like this for me. So now that we have completed our black armor highlights, we're going to move on to the red parts of the model. Raven Guard's armor is not really overly engaging, and it's primarily black with not a lot of accent. However, I chose the third company of the Raven Guard because they have kind of a red trim on their shoulder pads, and so I thought this would complement our black scheme pretty well. Ultimately, I do think having a brand new set of miniatures just to add some more filigree or, little doodads to make it a little bit more Raven Guardy would have helped. So I based the trim in wine red, and then for the shadows, I painted in an 80-20 mix of wine red and German gray, pretty heavily thinned down. For the highlights, I looked at my reference photos to try and figure out the light placement, and went in with an 80-20 mix of wine red and Antares Red, and then added more Antares Red with each subsequent layer, making sure to cover less and less from each layer like I mentioned before. Well, and since we're painting red already, I figured we might as well do the eye lenses as well. I opted to not go for the OSL effect a lot of people like to try and do, as I just didn't really thought it would look good or really wanted to do it. But for the lenses, I based them in a 50-50 mix of wine red and Antares Red, and then painted a smaller area of the lens, about half of it, with a thinned down area Antares Red, making sure to keep my recesses dark. Unfortunately, my big ol' noggin is in the way for a lot of this eye painting footage, so I do apologize for that, but you can just imagine what it looked like. I'm sure it looked really good. I then took a 50-50 mix of Antares Red and Fanatic Orange and painted only the back 50% of the lens. And in just the essence of trying to keep this simple, I was just doing a very basic specular highlight and placed a very small white dot on the back of each lens. And with that, we are done. Now, I will note it took me a couple tries to do these eyes because for whatever reason I kept messing up, but that's okay. That's why we can paint over things. So the gun on this guy was kind of a tricky thing to figure out how it should be painted. Ultimately, I scoured a bunch of Raven Guard artwork and decided that the kind of like under part of the gun is kind of just a straight black, and then the kind of like outer panel of the bolt gun is like a very dark metallic steel. And since I am trying to learn and get better at non-metallic metal, I thought that I could try and do that on this guy. Ultimately, I don't know if my highlight placement is logical, but I think it looks pretty good for my second attempt if I don't say myself. If I do say so myself, I'm so
Why are we still here?
confused now. Anyways, I think it looks alright, okay? I based the whole front panel in a 60-40 German gray and water mix to give it a very subtle darkish blue tone, I guess. I then added graphite to this mixture at about an 80-20 mix and began to layer it up in very thin layers, remembering to paint a smaller area than I did before. I kind of made my highlight placement a little random in this sense, and I don't know if it really makes a lot of sense logically, but I'm pretty happy with my effort, and I think it looks kind of sort of metallic-ish if you squint your eyes a little. As I increase in brightness, I would mix in silver gray into my mixture instead of graphite, and then my final highlight was a 50-50 mix of our previous mixture and bold titanium white. Real talk though, for my second ever attempt at non-metallic metal, I'm pretty happy with this and will continue to try and get better. So last but not least, we will discuss my freehand attempt. Now, I consider myself to be an okay-ish painter, but the Raymond Guard logo I painted on his left shoulder turned out pretty sad. However, I think I know how I would do it better in future attempts. Just get decals. No, I'm just kidding. But I think I would have probably just blocked out the whole shape of the logo at first instead of trying to paint in all the little details first time around. But oh well, it kind of resembles it, sort of, you know, remember, squint your eyes a little bit. But whatever, we move on. I even tried to put in some like pure white on the top and glaze in a little bit of gray on the bottom and try and give it a little bit of a highlight effect, but it kind of looks janky and I'm just kind of over messing with it. Now, my highlight placement isn't perfect and I kind of neglected the back of the miniature somehow. I didn't even realize this, but oh well. But for my first Space Marine in like 10 years, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm entering a new stage of my painting journey of trying to learn more quote-unquote advanced techniques like volumetric highlighting and non-metallic metal. And this was kind of like my second ever attempt down that path. And then wow, I'm now even realizing I didn't even paint the casings on the gun. Another thing I feel like I really need to up as I kind of continue my journey to get better is my basing. I am really lazy and not creative at all when it comes to doing it. And you can tell this mini how lazy I was about it as well. But, you know, maybe we will focus on getting better at basing in a future video. If you like this video, hit like, hit subscribe. It really helps me out, helps me know that you guys enjoyed the video and liked it, as I really enjoyed making this video and I have a lot of ideas on how to make it a little bit more interesting and intriguing in future attempts. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something. If you want to try this out yourself, make sure to check out the links down below. I have links to both randomizers so that you can do that part yourself. And then if you do it yourself, make sure to like tag me on Instagram or join my Discord and post it there. I'd really love to see your attempts. I think it could be a really fun like kind of method of community engagement. So if you try it out, do let me know. I'd love to see your attempts. Like I said, I hope you had fun. I had a lot of fun doing this. I tried to, you know, teach you a little something along the way. So I hope that, you know, as always, you elevate your game night.